And so then we see the political theater, where on TV, you have the Democrats and Republicans pretending to fight each other. They're going to argue and they're going to say that the other side hates, children, the other side hates freedom. And we've just got to, whatever side you're on, you got to pick one because this is a real battle. Whereas behind the scenes, they're actually helping each other. They're actually on the same side. Now, they're not just friends. They're actually promoting and working on the same agenda together. And we just don't realize it because we're looking at the words as opposed to the fruit. So we're going to kind of look at an example, a specific example of political theater. We're going to start with something, right, that happened in the past, make it a little bit easier for us to kind of accept the fact that we were probably fooled. And so a lot of people, right, you're going to say here, well, the lesser of two evils. Of course, George Bush, we didn't agree with everything. It's not, we can't have perfection. And so, but at least he's better than Bill Clinton. And so we've got to choose the lesser of these two evils. And so a great speaker on the Constitution, man by the name of Stephen Pratt, who's no longer with us, actually gave a presentation giving these two men as examples of what happens when we choose the lesser of two evils based on what we see on TV. What is the media feeding us of who's the lesser of two evils? And asking ourselves these questions. Who increased the debt more? So we're going to find out who's the lesser of these two evils. It was actually George W. Bush that increased the debt more. Who spent more money unconstitutionally? It was actually George W. Bush that spent more money unconstitutionally than Bill Clinton. Who grew government more? By a long shot, it was George W. Bush more than Bill Clinton. Who sent more troops into UN wars? Again, George W. Bush. Who attacked the Second Amendment more? That one, you might have a little bit of a, back and forth on that one. Who got the feds more involved in education? George W. Bush. Who defended abortion more? Abortion rights actually expanded and more money, more funding from the government went to abortion under Bush than actually Clinton. Who had more globalists in his cabinet? Shockingly enough, maybe to some of you, it was actually George W. Bush that had more globalists in his cabinet than even Bill Clinton. That pesky, horrible Democrat that was just an immoral person that was trying to take our guns and was working with China. As horrible as a person he was, if you're judging it on these things, you're going to say that actually Bill Clinton was the lesser of two evils. But that's the false argument. It's not about the lesser of two evils because we're not told the full story. We need to understand that it's a distraction because both of these men are on the same team. They're both fighting for world government. They're both working to destroy the liberty and independence of this nation. And so fighting about who's the worse or who's the better is a distraction that benefits the conspiracy because you're still picking between two globalists. So both of them are going to get you to where the conspiracy wants you to be. So left, right, it's the same evil outcome. Is it the lesser of two evils? No, of course not. We have this cartoon here that every election is just like, the turkey choosing between the axe and the machete on which way he's going to die. Now, we want to compare, right? Because what is the propaganda that gets us to believe the lesser of two evils and that one person is less evil than another? Leading up to the first Bush administration, when he was running for office, he would give they would have these debates, and he would present himself as being very much anti-globalism and pro-American independence. And so let's look at this. Let's see what does he say? What are his words?
But we can't be all things to all people in the world, Jim. And I think that's where maybe the Vice President and I begin to have some differences. I am worried about overcommitting our military around the world. I want to be judicious in its use. You mentioned Haiti. I wouldn't have sent troops to Haiti. I didn't think it was a mission worthwhile. It was a nation-building mission. And it was not very successful. It cost us billions, a couple of billions of dollars, and I'm not so sure democracy's any better off in Haiti than it was before. I'm not so sure the role of the United States is to go around the world and say this is the way it's got to be. We can help, and maybe it's just our difference in government, the way we view government. I mean, I want to empower people. I want to help people help themselves, not have government tell people what to do. I just don't think it's the role of the United States to walk into a country and say, we do it this way, so should you.
So we see this is the narrative that they want you to think, that he's like, this is just a difference in, our philosophy of government. You believe in we should be the policemen of the world, and I think that we should empower people. And so he's saying that he's anti-globalist. He's pro, just keeping America out of the affairs of the world. No, we're not the world's policemen. But what's the actual record, right? He had 5 nation-building, United Nations approved wars. He did more than the previous administration. So clearly what he was saying, his words were different than his fruits, as we're supposed to judge. And so, of course, right, as if there was a difference. After when Obama got into office, you had these billboards saying, "Do you miss me yet?" It was just a more of the same, not understanding that, right? The same thing. We look at the national debt, continues to go up each president. The Planned Parenthood, spending money on abortions, continue to go up no matter what. Taxpayer money to the United Nations, global government, continues to go up. And so we need to start to understand this idea, right? So these fake attacks. So as a rule of this tactic, the attack is publicized and rarely has a significant negative impact on the target. The publicity stunt provides a benefit by creating public support for the target. The target is a new hero because the media is attacking him. That must mean he's doing a good thing. And so therefore we have to support this new hero that is getting attacked by the conspiracy, right? The conspiracy hates me, but behind the scenes, it was just a stunt that made people think that he was a good guy that the conspiracy hated. And so this is one of those examples. We're going to go over again the public image versus the actual record, the fruits that we're supposed to judge by. And so, just some background, like myself, this was a hard thing for me to accept because Ronald Reagan was the president when I was a kid growing up, and I just loved his talks. And I was like in the 2nd grade, and my dad pulled me out of school, and we're going to go to the state capitol. We're going to hear President Reagan speak. And so you got the nostalgia. You have that. You're hearing their words, and you're like, yeah, that's exactly right. And you find it really hard to believe that they would be doing something, not just not living up to the rhetoric, but the complete opposite of the rhetoric. So let's see what Reagan, what is the public image of Reagan, and then compare it to the record.
This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. The full power of centralized government. This was the very thing the Founding Fathers sought to minimize. They knew that governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they know when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose.
First of all, I think you must have some principles you believe in. In mine, I happen to believe in the people and believe that the people are supposed to be dominant in our society. That they, not government, are to have control of their own affairs to the greatest extent possible with an orderly society.
Well, Johnny, I think that one of the things is that people keep looking to government for the answer, and government's the problem.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
So you have the rhetoric of an anti-communist. Tear down this wall. Government's the problem, not the solution. I believe in empowering the people. That's what we think of when we think of Ronald Reagan. But there's a fantastic book called The Insiders by Jonathan McManus. I encourage you to all get a copy of and look, and it goes into even more detail than I'm able to go tonight on the record. But I think it's important for us to be able to go over that. What's the real Reagan? What's the real record of this man? And not just once he became president. Some people will say, well, yeah, he was scared because of that assassination attempt on him. Again, right, that false hero. Going back to even being governor of California, the record is the same. Started as governor of California, and he attended the Bohemian Grove rituals that we mentioned in previous boot camps. As governor, he raised taxes, introduced the communist manifesto plank of the graduated income tax. He introduced tax withholding from paychecks. So basically making every single employer in the state of California an agent of the government, taking money out of every individual's pocket instead of them having to actually write a check to the government and realize how much they're being manipulated and stolen from every single month. Raised sales taxes and taxes on business. So even as governor of California, his spending increased more than the other states, including a 61% in communist, socialist welfare spending. He attacked, of course, Jimmy Carter when he was running for president for having CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, and trilateralists in his cabinet. But then after winning his first primary for the 1980 election, he replaced his campaign manager with a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and globalist William Casey. And then he appointed Casey as the head of the CIA once he became president. He ran ads that were critical of George Bush Sr.'s membership in the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations. But then after, of course, winning the nomination, he stated that he would pick a running mate with his values. And who did he pick with his values? The CFR trilateralist George Herbert Walker Bush. He also appointed Council on Foreign Relations members, Ambassador Anne Armstrong, Senator Howard Baker, and Henry Kissinger as his foreign policy advisors, globalist as his foreign policy advisors. And then on election day, he appointed CFR members as Secretary of the Treasury and Secretary of Commerce. And then after stating that he opposed the Trilateral Commission because they were soft on national defense, he appointed a trilateral member as the Secretary of Defense. Okay, the real Reagan, right? We see he's just 5 months into his administration. His cabinet was packed with 257 members of the Council on Foreign Relations. In senior positions such as heads of state and defense departments, he backed the U.S. taxpayer bailout of the Soviet satellite of Poland as Polish citizens were being imprisoned for supporting freedom. The Soviet Union wouldn't have lasted as long as it did if it was not for Ronald Reagan. Authorized the funding for nuclear steam turbines for the Soviet satellite of Romania and a steel plant for communist China. He sold arms to communist China. But when the free people of Taiwan wanted help, he denied it to them. He campaigned to cut the budget by $13 billion. In office, he actually increased it by $110 billion, and then passed the largest tax increase in history up to that point of $227 billion. Doesn't sound like much of an anti-communist, anti-globalist when you look at his fruit versus his words. So now let's look at another organization, one of these, people, the National Rifle Association, that states that it's there to protect your Second Amendment rights. I think it's known, but I think it's good to illustrate what is the public image of the National Rifle Association.
In a recent closed-door speech to donors, politicians, and media, Bill Clinton spoke about American gun owners. Quote, "A lot of these people, all they've got is their hunting and their fishing, or they've been listening to this stuff for so long that they believe it all," unquote. And we all remember Barack Obama's 2008 comments to a room of San Francisco elites. Quote, "It's not surprising then they get bitter. They cling to guns or religion," unquote. The arrogance of their superiority requires this reminder. They don't rule us. They don't give us rights. We grant them power. They don't make us safe. We pay to protect them. They don't make us free. We're free already. And as long as we have the Second Amendment, we always will be. We are America, and our politicians are only as powerful as we, the people, allow them to be.
In an effort to energize the gun rights activists, he released this incendiary fundraising letter.
That the semi-auto ban gives jackbooted government thugs more power to take away our constitutional rights, break in our doors, seize our guns, destroy our property, and even injure or kill us.
Aren't you concerned when you say Nazi bucket helmets, government thugs, kicking down doors, killing, maiming people? Aren't you inciting people? Aren't you willing now to apologize for the tone of this letter?
Those words are not far. In fact, they're a pretty close description of what's happening in the real world.
Wow, look at that hero, man. He is sticking it to them. He is calling out those pesky Democrats as those gun grabbers that they are, and that they're there to protect your God-given rights. And that, oh my, look at, he is, calling out the government for being the jackbooted thugs that they are. And he is standing up to that liberal Tim Russert. Man, he is going to show him what's up. That's the public image. Again, words versus fruits. So we look at the real NRA, according to their own records, their own words. They received government funding from their inception in the 1800s all the way up till the 1970s. In the 1920s, they actually pushed for gun control measures in 9 states requiring a permit to carry a gun. The NRA, before the NRA gets involved, there's no permit. You don't have to get government permission to carry a gun. NRA gets involved and they push a bill that says you need government permission to carry a gun, and a waiting period and a record of purchase going to the government. So because the NRA, we now have records of who purchases guns. They lobbied to ban mail order sales of guns in 1967. Prior to 1967 and the NRA's pushing of a bill, you could buy a gun just right over the mail. In 1968, they lobbied for tracking of guns and banning the shipment across state lines unless you were licensed. You got government permission to do so. In their own publication, The American Rifleman, in 1968, they bragged about their involvement of pushing more government intrusion into your right of self-defense, saying the NRA supported the National Firearms Act of 1934, which taxes and requires registration of such firearms as machine guns, sawed-off rifles, and sawed-off shotguns. NRA support of federal gun legislation did not stop with the earlier Dodd bills. It currently backs several Senate and House bills, which through amendment would put new teeth into the national and federal firearms acts, bragging about their taking away your right to defend yourself. Further on, it says the NRA supported the Federal Firearms Act of 1938, which regulates interstate and foreign commerce in firearms and pistol or revolver ammunition, not just the guns, but in government control of the ammunition itself. The NRA supported the original Dodd bill to amend the Federal Firearms Act in regard to handguns when it was introduced as Senate Bill 1975 in August of 1963. Can you believe this? So the real NRA we have here, again, the same guy that was on Tim Russert saying, these guys are jackbooted thugs. So we have the free speech zones, and now the NRA, who's supposed to be supporting your Second Amendment, is saying, we want you to have Second Amendment free zones where you're not allowed to be able to protect yourself. We think it's reasonable to expect full enforcement of federal firearms laws by the federal government. That's why we support Project Exile, providing 5 years federal prison for violations such as having a folding stock or bayonet. The NRA wants you to spend 5 years in federal prison for simply having a stock that folds or a knife at the end of your gun. This is the guys standing up against jackbooted thugs. The Constitution authorizes 0 restrictions on your right of self-defense. But the NRA, promoting themselves as defending the Second Amendment, wants to destroy the Second Amendment and is working to destroy it. Now they're actually, back after with the Patriot Act, after the 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers, the demolition of the Twin Towers, they actually opposed gun owners and expanding the government's powers in the unconstitutional Patriot Act. You had Rand Paul actually introduce legislation to stop this, and the NRA opposed Rand Paul's amendment, saying there have been no reports of the current Patriot Act being abused. The whole thing's an abuse. With respect to firearms records, however, supporters suggest a far-fetched scenario in which every firearm sales record in the country, tens or hundreds of millions of documents dating back to 1968, could be sought. Of course, it's being put into databases at this time, and so they opposed actually preserving your right to privacy and your right to defend yourself. They backed language that allows the BATF now to get access to every gun owner's purchase going back decades. So now we go into Glenn Beck as the next false opposition. Just some background, Glenn Beck in 2003, his company merged with Simon & Schuster and Viacom CBS. Then in 2006 and 2008, he had his own CNN, who's a corporate member of the Council on Foreign Relations program. 2008 to 2011, he had his own Fox, which is also a corporate member of the Council on Foreign Relations program. And then Glenn Beck promotes conspiracy outlets regularly by hosting the articles from the New Yorker, Washington Post, USA Today, and others, and even has people on his show that are members of the Council on Foreign Relations. And he also, just as a side note, spoke at the CPAC convention in 2019 and other years. So let's look at Glenn Beck actually in his own words. What does he say? So we can expose, people know his record. So let's look at what he says himself.
I think the bailout is the right thing to do. The $700 billion that you're hearing about now is not only, I believe, necessary, it is also not nearly enough.
Well, folks, we are getting new hints that President Obama may be increasingly open to the idea of a brand new national sales tax on everything you buy. They call it a VAT, a value-added tax.
But in the scheme of things, I think it's fair to look at a value-added tax.
Will Republicans hand the left a big VAT victory? The subtitle reads, Mitt Romney won't rule out the possibility of imposing a tax. Dan Mitchell, the Cato Institute, joins us now.
You say that Americans should fight VAT to our last and dying breath.
Every candidate running for president should have to sign in blood that they will never allow this European tax system to destroy the America's fiscal future.
We can bring the country back. You have to have a national sales tax.
I actually agree with you. I want a 2% VAT. I want a 2% VAT. You probably heard that President Bush yesterday acknowledged for the very first time the existence of secret CIA prisons. Thank God. It's these types of things, the stuff we never usually hear about unless we read the New York Times, that actually makes me feel more secure. I want a Jack Bauer out there. I love seeing cops doing bag checks on subway stations. I love seeing cops doing bag checks on subway stations. What we're talking about is waterboarding, and whether or not you're morally in favor of waterboarding or not. It is a far cry from torture. And it's going to take somebody who sits in front of Congress who's not afraid of them anymore and does what Jack Bauer did, and that is, yes, I did torture, and I'm proud of it. I'm for the bailout bill. It is going to cause us great pain if we don't have it. He's reminded us over and over again that President Bush was in office when TARP bailout happened. Well, we were all against that. We were all against that. Well, he says, I'm going to get every penny back from those greedy bankers. And most people cheer, as I do. I didn't want them to get the money in the first place. Bush started the bailouts. Yes, he did. Hated him for it. I will always tell you the truth, even when it hurts me personally. Here's the problem. I mean, everybody will say, oh, that Glenn Beck, he's a conservative. He just loved the Bush administration. No, I didn't. I did say the same things about George W. Bush. I did complain about his out-of-control spending. I did complain about his abandoning free market principles to save the free market system. I did complain constantly. 11,687. That is the number the Dow Jones closed at yesterday. That number is the highest ever. Our budget deficit has actually shrunk by 22.3% since last year. The economy is in fine shape.
These people.
Two things here. This is why I like George W. Bush. This is why I like George W. Bush. President Bush is a man who personally feels the pain of every lost soldier.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
He feels the pain of every wounded hero, every lonely, grieving parent this war has caused.
Nope, no weapons over there.
But above all, I can tell you that the president has incredible passion and resolve.
Maybe under here.
Many of these 9/11 truthers, who I've been telling you for years, are dangerous.
These truthers are exactly the kind of people who want to rock this nation's foundation, tear us apart. Are one of the groups that I've been warning about for a very long time, of these 9/11 truthers. This is the kind of group that a Timothy McVeigh would come from.
Senator Santorum voted for the Patriot Act, for an expansion of Medicare, and for raising the debt ceiling by trillions of dollars.
Senator Rick Santorum from Pennsylvania may just be the Winston Churchill of our day.
One of the criticisms I make is to what I refer to as more of a libertarianish right.
The libertarian view is, you know, isolationist from a national security point of view.
I don't pick or choose or back any presidential nominees.
I am throwing my support behind Rick Santorum now. Please win, Rick. Please.
Rick, we're begging. I came on your radio show, and you said, now, I said, I'm going to ask you 30 questions. But I gave answers to all 30, and then you finished. And then you finally said, I want to kiss you in the mouth. That's what you said.
Santorum once held his nose and voted to fund abortions, and Romney once openly and gleefully endorsed them.
I believe that abortion should be safe and legal in this country.
And I think this is the guy, this is the mechanic that can fix our finances. He's the guy who can fix the engine of our economy. I believe that with everything in me.
If it's between Obama and Romney, there isn't all that much difference.
The defense he makes of Romneycare could basically be a defense of Obamacare.
And I welcome you to the first of the 2012 presidential debates.
And the best course for health care is to do what we did in my state.
Last night, you saw somebody who took the stage that appeared to me to be George Washington.
Mitt Romney is obviously the choice of the Republican establishment.
He is not a politician. He is a man that I would strive to be like.
Those are the folks who brought us TARP and stimulus, wars fought on credit cards, federal agents writing their own search warrants, and the federal government taking over education.
In 2 weeks' time, America goes to vote for the next president of the United States.
Mitt Romney believes in all these things, but here's the crusher. So does President Obama. There's not a dime's worth of difference.
The American people have a very, very clear choice.
Mitt Romney might as well be Barack Obama on everything from warfare to welfare.
If you want a reason to vote for Mitt Romney, here it is. He knows what's going on with the Federal Reserve, and he is warning us.
Should the chairman of the Federal Reserve be appointed again?
You know, I think he's doing a good job. I
am going to vote for this guy.
Look, I'm not going to spend my time going after Ben Bernanke. I'm not going to take my effort and focus on the federal.
I sincerely hope that we are not at a place as Americans to where we are going to let the Democrats jam down the Green New Deal because we're at home panicked. I want to have a frank conversation with you and ask you where you stand. I'm in the danger zone. I'm right at the edge. I'm 56. In Italy, they're saying if you're sick and you're 60, don't even come in. So I'm in the danger zone.
Now, the German people, they got this. Now, if you're handed that hat and it's got the skull and crossbones on it, don't you look at it and go, and on a second thought, I might be on the wrong side. Doesn't that just scream wrong side? Wrong side?
Okay. That was a little bit long, but I think it was really important because he is seen by so many as such a conservative or, a hero for liberty, to show his back and forth, his lies, his support for people that were clearly and obviously being called out at the time. It wasn't like, nobody knew. It was obvious. There was lots of people calling out Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney for those things. And then, he supported Bush. He supported the bailouts. And then afterwards, when it became unpopular and it was already too late, he says, I was always against Bush and the bailouts. And so he's being deceptive, and he is pushing the official narrative. And so that way, everybody's saying, well, Glenn Beck, he researches this stuff and he's liberty-minded. He wouldn't be backing this if there wasn't something to it. And that's the role that he plays. And so it's essential that we understand this principle of false opposition, or we're going to continue to fall for it. So the bait and switch is that they claim to be doing something good. Well, of course, they're doing the complete opposite. You have legislators, government officials, fake charities, conspirator charities, fake freedom organizations, and non-governmental organizations that use this tactic, of course, all the time. Often uses the problem, reaction, solution formula to sell on their bait and switch campaign. So here's a real quick short video that it shows an example that we're seeing a lot now with housing. To get, you have both so-called conservative or liberty organizations pushing Agenda 21 housing, as well as the open lefty globalists doing the same thing.
Myth: stacking more people into tighter spaces makes housing affordable. Fact: stacking more people into tighter places artificially inflates housing prices. Even the liberal Sierra Club admits high-density housing raises housing costs, and the extreme high-density zoning in Hong Kong has made housing so expensive that many live in cage homes the size of dog kennels. The affordable housing agenda is a devious scheme.
So you have so-called conservative states, as well as states like New York and San Francisco, pushing the same thing. Where in states like Wyoming and Utah and Idaho, their conservative legislatures are actually passing legislation forcing every city in their state to have a certain amount of high-density housing. You can see in Hong Kong, they're actually living in kennels, and they're paying $2,000 a month to live in a kennel.